Welcome to Contingent Training Methods and You. Today you will be learning about the different types of contingent selection methods. These are also known as the final methods because in most cases we conduct them at the end of the selection process. The main three categories of checks we will be discussing are reference checks, background checks, and medical/drug tests. We save these checks for the end, once the applicant pool has been reduced, in order to save time and costs. The medical checks are required to be saved for the end due to the Americans with Disabilities Act's mandate that these types of tests only be conducted after the candidate has been given a conditional job offer. Sometimes an organization will conduct reference checks for their final group of candidates. These would be the first of the contingent selection methods due to its lack of costs outside of time. They essentially boil down to honesty tests. Reference checks involve following up on information provided by a candidate as well as contacting former employers to ask for their analysis of performance and character of the applicant. This analysis will give the HR manager a better idea of their prospective performance and whether they will be a good fit in the organization. While reference checks are good for providing an indicator of future performance, they can also be used to ensure that the information provided by the applicant is honest. Past employers are protected legally when providing this information as long as what they are saying is honest. Additionally, for certain jobs, if these reference checks are not carried out during the selection process, it can lead to legal action related to negligence in your hiring process. An example of one of these jobs would be a nurse or another type of caregiver because of the amount of responsibility that is involved. Time for our first learning check. Consider what you have just learned about reference checks. What would you say is the most important thing that a reference check tests for? If you said a candidate's honesty and character, then you are on the right track.
The different forms of background checks that will be discussed include credit checks, criminal background checks, checks performed by private investigations, and online searches. Credit checks are one of the most common background checks due to the potential impact of an applicant's financial responsibility and awareness on performance. In order to go forward with a credit check, consent must be provided by the applicant. These tests show various forms of incurred debts, payments, past loans, and in general, any other late payments that have occurred in the applicant's past. A credit score is not included during these checks. For an example, IMG has developed a money management team that handles their clients' general finances and reinvestments. For this type of position, a credit check would be crucial in ensuring that the final batch of candidates being considered are historically financially responsible. Criminal checks are also very common. These tests are usually done through the courts, police departments, and by viewing government and state records. Third-party information brokers do exist as an alternative, but information from these sources can be inaccurate or out of date. These checks show an applicant's criminal history and can include things like felonies and arrests. State law varies when it comes to how far back these tests can see and what kind of questions can be asked regarding these checks. The EEOC states that a person may not be denied employment based only on a criminal background check, and instead must be able to prove that it will have an impact on the requirements for the job. These checks are required for most government employees and for workers that are required to work with children, the elderly, or the disabled. A less common practice that goes beyond the traditional criminal background check is a private investigation. This rare practice is usually primarily for positions with high security clearance such as the FBI or the CIA. These checks involve the in-depth interviews with essentially everyone an individual has or currently is working with or interacts with. In the U.S., 70% of employers use social media as part of the screening process, according to a recent survey of more than 2,300 hiring managers and HR professionals by CareerBuilder. Employees don't like the idea of this new form of background checking, given that their personal lives are being looked over, and checking on a person's social media accounts isn't a very proven method of predicting job performance. This method is, however, a free way to do a preliminary screening. Examples of accounts that are commonly checked are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Given the popularity of this form of background checking, it is important to not post questionable content on social media because this could potentially be used against an applicant during the screening process.
Time for another learning check. Based on your newfound knowledge of background checks, which test would you say has the greatest impact on selection? If you said the criminal background check or the credit check, you would not be wrong for most positions. However, it is important to consider that all of these methods should have a varying degree of impact based on what the position in question is.
Drug testing is used in a variety of industries and jobs. For example, people who drive and operate heavy machinery will be required to do a drug test because they must be of sound mind and body while doing those tasks, or they are a danger to themselves and others. This is not only used as a screening for potential drug abusers, but also relieves liability of the organization if an employee is accused of wrongdoing. Drug tests are usually performed by an independent lab and are therefore costly. Most organizations save drug tests as a last step, and it is done once there is a job offer on the table, contingent on the individual passing the drug test. However, drug tests can be used as a screening tool in some cases. This can be done off-site in a lab or can be collected on location and taken off to a lab for testing. Let's check out what you've learned. Which of the following jobs would likely use a drug test to screen its candidates, and why? Fast food worker, forklift operator, ballet dancer. If you said forklift operator, you're right. Most jobs where heavy machinery is involved, a drug test is used as a screening method. Even though drug tests are expensive, they are a necessity for jobs like these. They also help with liability if an employee is accused of wrongdoing.